I came home from a hard day's work on the construction site, wanting nothing more than to sink into my lazy boy, fire up Thursday night football, and drink a six-pack of Lone Star. But that wasn't going to happen. It seems my wife of 10 years, Agnes, had other plans. She wanted to talk. "You remember my Aunt Martha who lives in Arkansas?" she asked, standing between my chair and the big screen. "Not really," I answered as I cracked open beer number 1. "Can you move?" She stayed there, firmly affixed to the floor and obstructing my view. Fortunately, it was just commercials. "Sure, you remember her," Agnes insisted. "She married that doctor in Little Rock. I think you met her at the family reunion a couple of years ago." "I don't remember," I continued. Against my better judgment, I then asked, "What about her?" Agnes smiled. She was happy I was engaging in the conversation. By my estimate, we had about 7.5 minutes before the game started, so I wanted to get this talking nonsense over with quickly. "Well, her boy, Jimmy," she began. "You remember little Jimmy?" I glanced at my watch and tried to look around Agnes's wide hips at the TV. "No," I said, as I drained what remained of the first beer and cracked open beer number 2. "Well, Jimmy got accepted to the University of North Texas and," she started, but I interrupted her. "Who doesn't?" I asked sarcastically. "What?" "Who doesn't get accepted to the University of North Texas?" I asked, completing the question. "It ain't like it's a real college." "That's not true, Bill. You know I graduated from UNT. Why would you say that?" Agnes seemed sincerely offended by my remark. "Yeah, I knew she graduated from UNT, and look what her degree has done for her. Not much. She taught history at the local freshman center and had not had any serious pay raise in years." "Sorry, keep going," I told her, growing impatient. 5 minutes to go. "Well, they are having a hard time coming up with enough money to pay for it all, and—" I cut her off again. "I thought he was a doctor," I said. "Who?" "Aunt Martha's husband. You said she married a doctor. Why would they have a hard time paying for UNT? It's one step above community college." "Maybe since they're out of state," Agnes suggested. "Sorry, go on." 4 minutes. "Well, Aunt Martha figured since we live so close to Denton, maybe Jimmy could come and live with us. That way, they'd not have to pay room and board. We don't even use the upstairs and—" I cut her off for the 3rd time. "Yeah, okay, whatever," I quickly conceded. "We had a 4-bedroom house that I helped build on land owned by my father right after getting out of the Army. My dad and I built it when Agnes and I got engaged. One day he would give it to me, but we had never got around to doing it. So far, Agnes and I haven't had any kids, but we were talking about trying too soon. Agnes was right. The whole upstairs went unused." "You mean it's okay?" Agnes asked, surprised I'd given in so quickly. The truth was, I didn't really care, but more importantly, we were down to 2 minutes before the game started. "Yeah, whatever," I replied. "Oh, good," Agnes said with a big smile. When she still stood there, I knew there must be more. "What else?" I asked. "I thought you might take more convincing, but I knew you would agree," Agnes said nervously. And well, I already told Aunt Martha it would be all right, and little Jimmy is already planning on moving in." 1 minute. "When?" I asked as I dropped the empty beer can into the trash can next to the coffee table and pulled the top on beer number 3. "He gets here on Saturday," Agnes said with a cringe. "This Saturday?" I asked as the opening theme of the game started playing. "Yes," Agnes admitted. I could tell she was afraid I would change my mind. "Okay," I said, gesturing with my beer. "Now can you move out of the way?" Agnes climbed on my lap and tried to kiss me. I struggled for a minute or two, then relented and let her do it, then sent her away with a swat on the rear. Agnes spent all day Friday and part of Saturday getting the guest bedroom all prepared for Jimmy's arrival. I guess our old stuff wasn't good enough for little Jimmy, so she bought a ton of things at Bed, Bath, and Beyond. By Saturday afternoon, Agnes was a nervous wreck. I wasn't sure why she was so worked up about it. I know I wasn't. Fortunately, Texas Tech won its game, and UT lost. I was a happy man. When the doorbell rang, Agnes jumped up, exclaiming, "He's here! He's here!" "Yay!" I said, unenthusiastically, staying in my recliner, cradling another Lone Star. Agnes ran out of the room. I could hear them at the door, and the two of them marching my way. When they entered the family room, to say I was shocked would be an understatement. Little. Jimmy wasn't little at all. He had to be easily 6'3" and well over 220, maybe more. "Hello, Uncle Bill," he said with a deep baritone. "Thanks for letting me stay here." I stared at the stranger as he stood there with his hand held out for quite a while before shaking it. Yeah," I replied. "Well, I'm going to show Jimmy to his room," Agnes chimed in. I nodded, still dazed. As they were leaving, I called out, "Agnes!" She stepped back into the family room with an expectant look on her face. "Yes, honey?" "Come right back. We need to talk," I replied. Agnes blushed and nodded her head. "Okay," she said. "I'll be right back." I sat there waiting, trying to think back to any time I'd met either Jimmy, his mother or father, or any of Agnes's kin from Arkansas. I couldn't remember anything. Not once had I ever heard mention of an Aunt Martha. I had put it out of my mind Thursday night, but now that little Jimmy was here, I really put my thinking cap on. About 10 minutes later, Agnes came back into the room, out of breath and grinning. "I got him settled. What was it you wanted to talk about?" she asked nervously. "Who is that?" I asked angrily, pointing up. "My cousin Jimmy, I told you," Agnes replied. "You said he could stay." "No, I said some kid named Little Jimmy just starting college could stay, not some grown man. Who is he really?" "He's Little Jimmy, my cousin. I told you about it years ago." "No, you didn't." "Well, Aunt Martha adopted Jimmy as a baby," she replied. "How about I make him feel uncomfortable because he looks like he is almost 30 and plays for the Dallas Cowboys? I thought he was supposed to be a kid." "He is," Agnes informed me. "He just turned 19 last month. Jimmy had to go to a junior college last year and got accepted to UNT starting in January." "January? Then why is he here now?" "It's October." I was getting upset. Things were not adding up, and I didn't like it one bit. "He needs time to get used to the area and find a part-time job," Agnes explained. "He's family, Bill. We can't turn him away." Just then, the big fella stepped back into the family room. "Hey, Agnes," he said. "Some friends of mine are inviting me out to dinner to welcome me to town. I don't have a car. Do you mind taking me?" "Oh, of course not," Agnes replied with a big grin on her face. "I don't mind at all." Then she turned to me and asked me if I wanted to go too. "No," was my only response. I watched as they walked out and heard them drive away. 30 seconds later, I was up and heading to the guest room. When I got there, I looked around the room and went through his stuff. There were no books, school supplies, or anything to indicate that he was a student. I found a few receipts wadded up on the dresser. I unfolded them and was surprised to see they were for fast food and groceries at locations in Dallas, one from yesterday and the other from last week. That was weird for someone who supposedly just arrived. I looked through the small amount of clothes he had brought and found a half-empty box of protection, large size, of course. I finished up and was about to walk out of the room when a sudden bit of curiosity hit me, and I looked in the small trash can next to the dresser. Inside, I found an open wrapper and a used item. Jesus, I thought. Was he carrying this around in his pocket all day? Then I thought about another possibility. Agnes had been blushing and out of breath after showing Jimmy to his room. They'd been up there no more than 10 minutes, so I didn't think that was the explanation for what I found. I put it out of my head for the time being and went back to watching sports and drinking beer. I guess I fell asleep in my chair. I woke up, and it was dark outside. I had a headache, a stiff neck, and an empty pit in my stomach where my dinner should have been busy digesting. I shuffled to the kitchen and turned on a light, noticing the clock said it was 9:45. What in the world? Where was my wife, and why had she not fixed me dinner? I opened the fridge and pulled out a cold slice of pizza from a few nights back. I munched on it and popped open a Dr. Pepper. I sipped it and looked around the dark house. That's when I remembered about Jimmy. "Agnes?" I called out as I wandered the house. I looked in our bedroom and then went up to the guest room. Nothing had changed, and nobody was home. I found my cell phone on the charger and called Agnes. I could hear my wife's phone chiming away, which was odd since she should have it with her. I looked for it and found it in our bedroom on the charger on her nightstand. Well, that's just great, I thought. How am I supposed to reach her if she didn't take her phone? I ate a couple more slices of pizza and switched from Dr. Pepper to Lone Star. I waited another hour and was getting really irritated, so I did what I usually did in that condition. I got out my guns and started cleaning them. The ritual of disassembling and reassembling them calmed my nerves. It was something held over from my days in the Army. I had just finished putting my Glock 19X back together when the front door opened and in walked my wife and her alleged cousin, laughing and joking. When they saw me, they both stopped dead in their tracks, a look of terror on their faces. "Where have you been?" I demanded. Agnes glanced at Jimmy, who was frozen, with his hands raised in the universal don't shoot gesture that apparently everybody except cops understood. We took Jimmy to meet his friends for dinner," Agnes reminded me. "But they insisted I stay and eat with them. After that, we had a few drinks, and we were having such a good time. I guess I forgot how late it was." "You forgot my dinner," I said, letting her know I was upset. I slid the Glock back into its holster and set it aside. Jimmy visibly relaxed. "There was pizza in the fridge," Agnes explained. "Yeah, I ate it." "Oh, okay, so you didn't go hungry," Agnes replied. Jimmy seemed to have recovered a bit and tapped my wife on the shoulder. "Hey, I'm gonna head to bed." I noticed he didn't speak to me. I ignored him, and he left the room. "Well, I'm going to go take a shower and then get ready for bed," Agnes said. "You coming?" "I'll be there in a bit," I told her. "I have a few things I need to take care of first." When Agnes left, I locked my firearms back in the safe, except for the Glock, which I kept with me. Sunday, I spent the day glued to the NFL, so I don't really know what went on with Agnes and little Jimmy. They stayed out of my way, which was good. The Cowboys won too, so I was in a good mood come supper time. Agnes brought me food when I needed it and kept the Lone Star flowing until about halftime of the Sunday night game. I had to get up and get it myself and was just settling in for the second half when there was a knock at the door. Somebody ordered pizza. It was triple pepperoni and double cheese, which is my favorite, so I figured Agnes ordered it for me. She wasn't such a bad wife after all. I ate all but 2 slices and put a healthy dent in the case of beer I'd opened for the previews earlier in the day. I ended up falling asleep in the chair and woke up with a headache. I got up and went to the bedroom to shower and get dressed. I noticed the bed was neatly made, and Agnes wasn't in it. I didn't think too much of it, as she was often up well before me. When I was done getting ready, I headed down to the kitchen and found her making coffee and heating up a couple of frozen Max's donuts in the toaster oven. We'd go buy them in bulk, then bring them home to freeze. That way, they lasted us a long time, and I could avoid the lines. Agnes was smiling and gave me a big kiss as she handed me my first cup of coffee. I noticed her robe was untied, falling open, and she was undressed underneath. I had eaten breakfast and just finished my second cup when Jimmy showed up, wearing only boxers. Agnes gave him a hug and a somewhat inappropriate kiss, for an aunt. I noticed with growing concern that her robe was still not tied shut. I grumbled and left them for their breakfast. I had important things to do. I had been selected the Rotary Club's Man of the Year and was being given a big award on Friday. I had to give a speech, so I needed to practice and see myself giving it. So, I set up a video camera in the bedroom and stood in front of it, giving my speech to an imaginary crowd. It was pretty darn good if I do say so myself. I mixed in a good amount of jokes and humor as well as more serious moments. I had it down to about 18 minutes but needed to get it to 15. I was on my 4th run-through when Agnes stuck her head in to ask me why I was late for work. "I'm not late," I snapped, then looked at my watch. "Oh no, I'm late." I ran out of the room, grabbed my work bag, and headed to the office, calling my boss to tell him I was stuck in traffic. I had a typical day, but I couldn't help thinking about how weird it was with Jimmy being tall and all. Not that there's something weird about being tall, but there was something strange about her cousin being that way. Agnes has a younger sister named Ursula who lives in Denver. She's married to a guy named Trevor. I never really liked him. He was from Boston and was a Patriots fan. That was enough to make me dislike him. But he was also a handsome, smug, condescending little fellow. At the moment, I couldn't think of anybody else to call, so I called him. Well, he said when he answered. "If it isn't my brother-in-law. How's it going, Bill? You must really need something to call me." "Yeah, well, that's true," I admitted. Not wanting to waste time on chit-chat, I got to the point. "Do you know much about Agnes and Ursula's family?" "Not that much," he said. "I met their worthless brother Abe. That's about it." "What about their Arkansas kin?" I asked. "Arkansas?" he asked, sounding puzzled. "I never heard of any relatives in Arkansas." "Why?" "So you never heard about no Aunt Martha in Little Rock, married to a doctor who can't afford to pay for UNT and has a 6'4" adopted son named Little Jimmy?" No," he replied. "I can't say that I have. Want me to ask Ursula? She's right here." "Yeah, if you don't mind." He must have put the call on speaker, as I could hear their conversation perfectly. "Hey, Urs," he said. "It's your sister's husband, Bill. He wants to know if you have an Aunt Martha in Little Rock." "Hey, Bill," said Ursula. "I don't have an aunt named Martha anywhere and don't know anybody from Little Rock. Why? What's going on? Some kind of scam?" "Yeah," I said, feeling my anger welling up inside me to the point of popping out. "You got that right. A scam I'm fixing to put an end to." "To which I'm fixing to put an end," Trevor said. "Huh?" "Nothing," Trevor said with a laugh. "Was there something else you needed, Bill?" "No, that was it," I answered. "Bye." I hung up the phone and started pacing my office. "The lying woman!" I shouted. "How dare she bring that man into my home and try to fool me? I'm onto their scheme now." I sat down in my chair, pulled a bottle of hooch from the back of my cabinet, and poured some into my coffee mug. "Now I just gotta figure out what it is they're doing," I said out loud as I took a big sip. I left work early and got home at around 5 o'clock to a quiet house, with no sign of my phony cousin-in-law. Agnes was in the kitchen fixing supper and looked up, surprised when I walked in. "Oh," she declared, "it's you." I noticed she was wearing the robe again, still hanging open. I couldn't help but notice the absence of her usual appearance. "Sorry to disappoint," I said. "Where's Jimmy?" "He had to go meet his friends to pick up some weed killer," she stammered. "Weed killer?" I asked, scratching my head. "What the heck is he getting weed killer for?" I started wondering if maybe they were some kind of terrorist cell, and weed killer was used in explosive vests. "Have you seen our yard lately?" Agnes asked. "It's more weeds than grass. He's minoring in garden culture." "Garden culture?" I asked, wondering what kind of liberal programs these schools have nowadays. "Horticulture," she corrected me. "Get your mind out of the gutter." "What's that?" I asked. "Plant stuff," Agnes answered. "You know, how to grow stuff and whatnot." "If he kills the weeds, we'll only have dirt for a yard," I told her. "Tell him thanks, but no thanks." "Oh, okay," Agnes said with a smile. "I'll let him know." I started to walk out of the room, but I thought maybe I'd give her one chance to come clean. "Agnes?" I said. "Yes, Bill?" "You got anything you want to tell me?" I asked. "You know, like confess?" She stared at me for several seconds. She drew her robe closed but didn't tie it. "I burned dinner," she said. "I'm sorry." "That's it?" I asked. "Yeah, sorry," she said. I nodded and grabbed a Lone Star, then headed to the bedroom to change clothes. I noticed a scent in the house, kind of reminded me of a skunk that we once had spray our dog. Kind of sickly sweet, pungent. If that was Jimmy's cologne, the boy had strange tastes. I started to get into my sweatshirt and pants, which I wore every evening when it was cold, but decided I should investigate what my wife and her so-called relative were up to. I snooped around the room, but couldn't find anything unusual or out of place, so I went ahead and changed clothes. When I went back to the kitchen to eat, Jimmy was back. "Look," I said, "don't be putting any weed killer on my lawn. I like it the way it is." "Say what?" he asked. "Weed killer," I said, speaking slowly. "Agnes said you went to go get weed killer. So don't. I don't need my weeds killed." "Oh, Jimmy said, staring at my wife, who just shrugged. "Yeah, sure, whatever." Agnes handed me a bowl of warmed-up leftover chili from a few nights ago. I grabbed the Louisiana sauce and another Lone Star and went out to the family room to watch Monday Night Football and eat. The game was terrible. It was a blowout. By halftime, I was bored and remembered my speech. I decided to abandon the football game and review the clips of me rehearsing my speech from the morning. I got up and headed to the bedroom. As I passed the stairs, I could smell the skunk much stronger now. Maybe we had a dead one in the attic or something. I retrieved the video camera from my bedroom, and the battery was dead. I took it to my office and plugged it in. When it started up, I found that it had recorded most of the day. Apparently, I had left it on when I went to work in such a hurry. "Oh, maybe it recorded some kind of clues as to what they're up to," I thought. So, I skimmed through my rehearsals. The video was playing at fast speed and was unchanged for a long time, just a shot of our empty bed. After quite a while, it changed, and I let go of the fast-forward button. I saw Jimmy and Agnes in an intimate situation on my bed. It took me a few seconds to realize what was happening. The feet I recognized were connected to legs I knew which were connected to my wife. "So that's what they're up to," I said out loud. "Well, at least they aren't terrorists." I was relieved for a moment, but then the realization that my wife was being unfaithful hit me hard. She had the nerve to lie to me and bring this man into my house, to be with him under my roof, behind my back, in front of my face, and under my nose. At first, I thought, forget it. If the fellow wants Agnes, let him have her. I'm done with her anyway. He can pay for everything and all the stupid stuff she always wanted money for. By then, I was getting angry and I wanted to teach her a lesson. I went back to the video, needing more proof, and scanned forward. I let go of the button, and the video resumed at a point where they were done with their activities. Agnes lay on the bed, and Jimmy was next to her. "Do you think he has figured anything out yet?" Jimmy, if that was even his real name, asked. "No, he's too unintelligent to have a clue," my loving wife said. "I almost lost it when I walked in the door and he saw me. I could tell he was thinking, 'Holy cow, he's tall.'" Agnes laughed, and then lit up what looked like a cigarette, taking a bit of puff and holding it until she started coughing. She passed the cigarette to her companion. "He is such a dummy," Agnes said. "We've been together almost non-stop and he has no idea. You took me to your buddy's place for a get-together the first night you were here, and he didn't catch on. Trust me, we could do things right in front of him as long as football was on, and he'd not notice. Being in the same room with him when he passed out from too much beer was the best," Jimmy said. "Oh yeah," Agnes agreed. "That was the night we did those things. I never let him do that, not once the whole time we've been married." "Roll over," he said. "I want to do that now." Not until you tell me the whole plan for how we're going to get rid of Bill and take all his money, Agnes said. Oh, okay, Jimmy replied. Well, he laid out the whole plan. They were going to arrange it, so I had an accident and got hurt. Only it wasn't really going to be an accident. It was going to be Jimmy's buddies making sure I was injured. Jimmy and Agnes would be at church, in front of an entire congregation, so nobody would suspect them of foul play. I had to admit it was a good plan. Then he continued with their personal activities. Agnes made a lot of noise the whole time. Agnes sounded like she was really enjoying herself. When he finished, Jimmy got up, and I'd be darned if my unfaithful wife didn't do things I would never have imagined her doing. I was so disgusted by her action that I couldn't imagine ever kissing her again. Nauseated, I turned the video camera off and stomped out of my office and went back to the family room as the game was just ending. I looked around for Agnes but couldn't find her. I figured she must be upstairs with her cousin. I thought about getting my gun and going up there to confront them, but I had a better idea. A few days later, I had prepared my plan. I suggested that Agnes take little Jimmy shopping to get him a new wardrobe in preparation for the school year starting. They both thought that was a spectacular idea. I told her to take her time and not worry about my lunch. I'd grab something. As soon as they left, I loaded my bags, tools, guns, and all our electronics into my truck and took off. My dad owned a hunting lodge out near Tyler in East Texas that Agnes didn't know about. It was about a 2-hour drive, but with stopping for lunch and groceries, it took me almost 4 to get to the cabin and unload. I made a few phone calls on the way. First, I called my dad and let him know I was activating Operation Freedom. He assured me he would do his part. Second, I called the lawyer I had retained and told him to go ahead with the divorce filing. Lastly, I called the bank and told them we suspected my wife's cards were stolen and had them deactivate them temporarily. I didn't close the accounts, as I never kept much money in them anyway. I hated banks and held my liquid assets elsewhere. About 30 minutes after I arrived and cracked open my first Lone Star, my phone rang. I chuckled when I saw it was Agnes. I answered. "Something's wrong with the credit cards," she practically shouted. "Wrong?" I asked. "What's wrong with them?" "They don't work," she said excitedly. "I just tried all of them, and they were all declined. I got about $500 worth of stuff here for Jimmy. How am I supposed to pay for it all?" "That's weird," I said, playing dumb. "Can't you pay cash?" "I don't carry that much cash with me," Agnes shouted. "You talk to the store person and straighten this out." "No," I told her. "I'm busy." "You figure it out." I hung up the phone and emptied my beer with a gleeful smile. Agnes called me back a couple of minutes later. "Bill, I had to put all that stuff back. Did you call the bank?" "No," I replied. "I told you I'm busy." "Well, how am I supposed to pay for all this stuff?" she asked. "I don't know, Agnes," I said, trying not to laugh. "Think the manager will give you a deal for them? Maybe little Jimmy can help you get enough money to pay the bill." "That's not funny, Bill," Agnes yelled angrily. "I need you to come here right now and fix this." "Not happening," I told her. Then I hung up again. The quiet was disturbed about 30 minutes later when she called back. "We've been robbed," Agnes shouted into the phone as soon as I answered it. "What are you talking about?" I asked, again playing dumb. "The TV and stereo, all the computers, they're all gone," she shouted. "Someone must have broken in while we were gone and taken it all. Where are you?" "I went out of town," I told her. "You what?" Agnes shrieked. "Why didn't you tell me? Where are you and what are you going to do about all this missing stuff and about my credit cards?" "I'm out of town," I repeated. "And I'm not going to do a darn thing. If you have a problem, deal with it yourself." I hung up and decided I didn't want to hear from her anymore. So I logged on to the ATT website and turned off her phone. Almost an hour passed, then my phone rang. It was Dad. This ought to be good, so I answered. "Hey, Dad, did you do it?" I asked. "Yeah, she about lost it," he said, laughing hysterically. "Great. Tell me everything," I said. "All right. Well, I drove up to the house and rang the bell, Dad explained. She was happy to see me at first. She tried to get me to call you as it seems her phone didn't work anymore. I told her no, then handed her the eviction papers. She didn't understand what they were for, so I told her she and Jimmy were being evicted. Bet she loved that, I said. Oh, heck yeah, Dad replied. She didn't understand. She wanted to know how I could evict her from her own house. So I explained that the house doesn't belong to you and her. I own it. I told her you moved out, and since you weren't living there anymore, I wasn't about to let her and her cousin live there for free. How'd she take it? Not well. Then that big fella tried to get physical with me, Dad said. So I introduced him to my friends Mr. Smith and Mr. Wesson. Did you shoot him? I asked, halfway hoping he had. Nah, Dad said. Wasn't worth the trouble it would have caused. All right, well, I appreciate the update, I told him, then hung up. The next day, my lawyer called to let me know they had served the papers on Agnes. She apparently fainted and had to be taken to the hospital. When she recovered, she asked for me, but nobody knew where I was. Some of them did, but lied to me. I stayed in hiding for a while. Only 2 people knew where I was, my lawyer and my dad. Dad let me know that Agnes had been thrown out of the house, kicking and screaming, and had apparently shacked up with Jimmy and 3 of his buddies. I bet all 4 of them were with her. I was in no hurry to settle things. In fact, the longer I let things drag on, the harder it would be on Agnes financially. She might even have to get a job. Finally, after almost 2 months, I heard from my lawyer that she was fighting the divorce and had somehow managed to hire an attorney to represent her. I was required to appear in court, so I drove back to Dallas and checked into a hotel. I arrived in the courtroom and was shocked when Agnes came in. I hardly recognized her. She'd lost a ton of weight and looked haggard. She stared at me with hatred in her eyes. I was patient and let my lawyer do all my talking. Agnes tried to argue that the house was ours, so we gave the judge proof that the land and house belonged to my father. I had helped build the house, but at no point did he ever transfer ownership to me. We had been living there, thanks only to his generosity. Then, Agnes tried to claim that I had a lot of money. She was under the belief that I owned the construction company. Unfortunately for her, the company was also Dad's. I was just an employee, or used to be. He fired me several weeks back for abandoning my job. So right now, I was an unemployed bum. The only thing of value I owned that she could prove was my old beat-up pickup truck. We had not filed for the divorce for adultery. Texas is not precisely a no-fault state, but pretty close. I never mentioned Jimmy had anything to do with the divorce. In fact, I never really explained much about why I wanted the divorce. So, that became her next bone of contention. She wanted to know why I was divorcing her. The judge wanted to know too. Your Honor, I said, can I speak plainly? He nodded and said, without objection, go right ahead. Nobody spoke up, so I plunged ahead. Your Honor, I realize that my wife and I have irreconcilably different religious beliefs, and because of that, I can no longer be married to a woman of her irregular moral beliefs. Religious belief? Agnes shouted. What the heck are you talking about? I'm Baptist, same as you. Son, I thought you said you wanted to speak plainly, the judge said. Yes, sir, Your Honor, I agreed. I do. Then I suggest you do so. What are you getting at? Well, my wife cares a lot about her family, I explained, which I ain't got no problem with. When her Aunt Martha asked us to let their son, little Jimmy, board with us while he went to UNT, I was fine with it. Then what's the problem? He asked. Well, you see, Your Honor, I began. I realized how different our ideals were when I realized she doesn't think there's anything wrong with incest. There were a couple of gasps from the gallery. Everyone, including the judge, was looking at me like I was crazy. Incest? The judge asked, sounding surprised. Yes, sir, I said. That cousin Jimmy of hers wasn't in the house 10 minutes, and I'll be darned if she was already being intimate with him. The courtroom got a little chaotic at that point. My wife jumped up and started screaming at me. Her lawyer was yelling at her. Jimmy and his buddies raised a ruckus. The judge had a hard time getting things back under control. He had the bailiff drag cousin Jimmy out, along with his posse. He finally threatened to throw everyone out if there were any more outbursts. "Son, do you have any proof of this allegation?" he asked me. "I don't know, Your Honor," I said, scratching my chin. "I got this videotape that I accidentally shot of the two of them in bed. I couldn't stomach watching it myself, but you're welcome to it if you reckon it would help." Agnes and her lawyer both jumped up again, yelling some nonsense. The judge told them both to sit down and shut up. "A video of your wife and her cousin in bed, having intimacy?" the judge asked. "Yes, Your Honor," I replied. "How did you accidentally record them?" he asked. I explained to him about being Man of the Year and all that. He asked me for the video, so my lawyer handed him the camcorder with the recording all queued up and ready to go. I sat back as the judge watched the tape. He called the bailiff over, and a few minutes later, the video appeared on all the TV screens in the courtroom. My wife's lawyer tried to object, but the judge told him to sit down and shut up. Suddenly, there it was. My wife was with her cousin for all to see on all the screens in the courtroom. "Would your client care to explain this?" the judge asked Agnes's lawyer. He glared at my wife, then feebly replied, "Your Honor, that's not her cousin. There's no incest involved." "Oh, so she's just shacking up with and having an affair with some guy behind her husband's back then?" the judge asked. Well," the lawyer stammered, "I don't believe that he has filed for divorce on the grounds of adultery, so any evidence of her infidelity is pointless." The judge turned to me and asked, "Would you care to amend your petition for divorce to be on the grounds of adultery? You've certainly provided sufficient proof that she was cheating." I shared a look with my lawyer and nodded. "Yes, Your Honor. My client would like that." "Request granted," the judge said, then added, "Be sure to file the necessary paperwork today." He turned back to my wife. "You have anything you want to say before I grant this divorce?" "I don't want a divorce," my wife shouted. "Well, then you should have thought about that before you spread your legs for another man," the judge said, scolding Agnes. "Your Honor, if I may," my attorney said. "Yes?" "If you advance that video up to the 2-hour and 27-minute mark, I think you'll find an interesting conversation between Agnes and her cousin. I mean her lover that contradicts her recent declaration." "Oh, is that right?" the judge asked rhetorically. We waited as he fast-forwarded, and then the video began, and my wife cringed and buried her face in her hands. It was all I could do to suppress my laughter. "I am so done with my husband," Agnes began, talking to Jimmy. "I'd divorce his sorry back, but I like your plan better." "You mean the kill him, take the insurance money, the land, the business, and everything plan?" Jimmy asked. "Yeah, that plan," Agnes said with a wicked laugh. "But how would you do it so that we don't get caught?" "I have friends in low places," Jimmy said. "They would hit him while you and I are someplace public with perfect alibis. Then they would dump his body somewhere nobody would ever find it." "That's perfect," my loving wife declared. After that, I pretty much got everything I wanted out of the divorce, and Agnes got nothing. I didn't even look at her as I left the courtroom. I let my lawyer handle everything. I mean, that's what I pay the guy for. It had been 2 months since the dust settled on the divorce. Agnes was still with Jimmy. Her maintenance money from me had run out, and Jimmy put her to work, turning tricks down on a corner on Harry Hines. I guess to cope with it all, she turned to drugs. Last I heard, Jimmy had beaten her up pretty badly for not producing enough. I had taken up jogging and exercising. I spent a couple of hours a day running through a park near my house. When I wasn't busy banging all the hot young chicks at the gym, I spent my free time dating, well, if you call, Agnes's younger sister, dating. Then, one evening around twilight, I was just getting out of my car at the park to start my run when 3 men jumped me. I recognized Jimmy right away. "Well, I was wondering when this day would come," I said as the 3 of them pulled out knives. "You got it coming, old man," Jimmy said. "You messed everything up. Now we're gonna make you pay." My first shot hit Jimmy in the center of his chest, sending him back and on his back. The second shot hit his larger buddy in his left eye. I had to use 2 shots on the third assailant. The first blasted through his gut, but not before he opened a gash on my left side. My final shot took off the back of his head. I dropped to my knees, watching Jimmy as he clutched at the hole in his chest for a few seconds before death came for him. I guess I blacked out. When I woke up, I was in the hospital. Agnes was there, sitting next to me. Or at least I assumed it was Agnes. She'd changed so much that it was hard to believe she was my ex-wife. Now, she was a balding, toothless, cracked-out meth head, a cheap woman. "Oh, thank God!" she cried out. "You're alive!" I looked around the room. "What happened?" I asked. "You killed Jimmy and his thug friends," Agnes explained. "One of them stabbed you. You lost a lot of blood, but you made it. I wanted them to give you my blood, but they wouldn't let me due to the herpes and all the other diseases I got." "Thank God," I mumbled. "Fortunately, my sister has the same blood type," Agnes said. "What are you doing here?" I asked. I wanted to follow up with, "And when are you leaving?" but let it go. "I'm dying, Bill," she said as she wiped away a tear. "Can you forgive me? I know I was a fool and destroyed our marriage for a lot of intimacy. You are the best man I've ever known, and I betrayed you. The doctors say I have 6 months at most. Please forgive me so I can go in peace." I was a better man than she deserved, and I knew it. Truth is, I'd already forgiven her. Like hell I had. "Forget you, you filthy, disease-ridden tramp," I shouted. "Get out of here before you give me something they can't cure." Agnes stared at me in disbelief. Just then, her much hotter, younger, and better sister came in. "Agnes! Who let you in? I told them you were not allowed," my new friend started shouting. "Security! Get this woman out of my man's room!" Agnes got up and scurried toward the exit. "Agnes, wait!" I called out. She stopped and turned back expectantly. "Say hello to Cousin Jimmy when you see him in hell," I snarled at the cheating witch. "I guess some people are more forgiving than me." And that's the end of today's story. If you enjoyed it, please give this video a thumbs up and drop a comment below. Your support helps the algorithm push my content further. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It really helps me keep creating more stories for you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.